So what even are these things that we call Urtext editions, and is it worth spending the extra price to get one? Right here, I'm holding a Henley Beethoven. I got a Mozart Bärenreiter, a Haydn Wiener Urtext. I even have this Brahms late pieces Kuhnemann Music Budapest, published in Köln, Germany. So this video, I'm going to break up into 3 parts for you. The first part is just talking about what these are, what makes Urtext different in the first place. The second part, I'm going to kind of tell you about some things they can do for you and some things they can't do for you. And the third part, I kind of want to talk about 2 less discussed benefits of getting a good edition like this. And then, of course, I'll give you my recommendation. And just so you know, this video is not sponsored in any way, shape, or form by any of these companies. This is not me being paid to promote a particular edition to you. This is me saying, here are some helpful things to know before you dive into the deep market and sea of all the different types of editions that are out there. All right, time for part 1. What even is an Urtext? Now, to answer that question, we're going to take a little bit of a music publication history lesson, and it's going to be a lot of fun. This is a high-level overview. If you're already an expert in this topic, I'm sorry it's not detailed enough for you. Also, why are you watching this video? You probably already know. But way back in the early mid-1800s, people started bringing back older composers' music into their era. Now, they were the Romantic composers, so they're bringing back the classical and the Baroque composers. And what tended to happen back then is you brought pieces into your era and I call upgraded the piece. So they are massively altering these pieces. It was their practice in the 1800s of the publishers to add stuff to help you out. Now, this makes some degree of sense because there wasn't music audio recordings. There wasn't any audio recordings back then, right? It took a while. We're still 50, 60, 70 years away from audio recordings. So how could you know what a composer intended? Like if you were playing piano in the 1870s and you pull out a piece by Mozart that's 100 years old, you don't quite know what that style sounded like either. So the publisher might help you out and add in some slurs, add in some staccatos, add in some dynamics. Also, in older music, there tends to be not near as many markings as music had in the mid-1800s. So people who played piano or other instruments were used to seeing a bunch of markings, a lot of dynamics, a lot of crescendos, a lot of decrescendos, ritardandos, and they might just not have much of that back in Mozart. So the publishers helped you out. For example, Beethoven plays a melody and he says, play this melody forte. It comes back later and he says, play it forte. It comes back again at the end of the piece and he doesn't say anything. Forte, piano, mezzo, nothing. The editor might say, well, yeah, there's an implied forte. Let me just write that forte in. There could be more extreme examples like, well, we're going to kind of assume the slurring of the Chopin piece and we'll just kind of add slurs in because obviously Chopin's supposed to be legato. Let's add a lot of slurs in because this piece here doesn't have very many slurs and we don't want people playing Chopin with all like choppy and they say, well, the book told me to play choppy. That's why I played it that way. So we're going to add slurs. We're going to add pedal markings into the music. So what an Urtext, or you could say an original version, tries to do is go back to the composer's original manuscript or maybe the first published edition or some combination of those 2 things or maybe other sources possibly, and put together what the composer actually wrote. After years and years and years of publishers and also publishers publishing off of publishers, just adding in stuff and dynamics and slurs, sometimes notes, it's hard to know like what did the composer actually write down. That is the basic goal. Again, this is high level overview of the idea, of the concepts, of the history, but that's in essence what an Urtext is trying to do, saying, did Beethoven say staccato? Or are we assuming staccato? Or did Beethoven say to use the forefinger there? Or did someone just think the forefinger made sense, so he added in a 4 there? What did Beethoven actually tell us to do? Let's start sliding in here to point 2 and talk about what these editions can do for you and what they can't do for you. I think the benefits are probably pretty obvious as you start diving deeper and deeper into music and you start gaining a sense for how a musical style goes, how an era can be played, how a composer writes his music. You really want to know, well, what did they write? If all you've ever played is heavily edited editions with tons of extra articulations thrown in there, how do you know how Beethoven typically slurs? If all you've ever seen is what editors say, and editors have 75 slurs in a piece, and only 15 of those are Beethoven, they don't even tell you which 15 were Beethoven and which 60 were ours, how do you ever get a sense of Beethoven's use of slurs? You don't know. I remember like when I first kind of started using better editions, people would say, well, Beethoven doesn't slur this way. And I say, well, yeah, he does. Look. And they're like, Beethoven didn't write that slur. You're like, oh, I learned part of Beethoven's style wrong because I learned some of Beethoven on a bad edition. And you could apply this to a lot of composers. If you always play Bach in an edition that has tons of dynamics and pianos and crescendos and decrescendos and ritardandos, and then you actually play Bach and you're like, there's none of that. There might not be a single dynamic or expressive marking in the entire piece, but you're used to seeing that. You don't maybe know how Bach builds drama. You just know how to follow what the editors say. And again, you can't really give an authentic performance of that piece because you're just kind of doing what the editor told you to do. So like I said, I think the benefits are a little more obvious. Having a clean score, having you actually learn what the composer says and how to play their style. But I want to talk about what the editions won't do for you. They won't make you musical. It's not like you're going to buy a Henley and then automatically have a sense of how classical music should be played. Like, you know what I mean? You're not going to get into Mozart's sound by owning a Henley or a Barenreiter of Mozart. It doesn't automatically make you like a good interpreter of Mozart. In fact, those are going to be pretty bare bones. And there are editions out there that add in notes, add in dynamics, add in articulation, not notes, articulations and dynamics, and do it in a pretty tasteful way that, you know, if you play their version of it, it'd be better than playing a really boring, plain vanilla version of it with nothing added in because you thought, well, I have an Urtext, I'm automatically musical. They don't make you musical, and they don't like give you a shortcut to learning a musical style. Like, you still need to play many pieces by Mozart, many pieces by Brahms, many pieces by Schumann to get into how that composer writes music before you can understand their musical style. But by buying the edition, it does not automatically mean when you play Beethoven, you're going to be like an authentic interpreter of Beethoven's music. Now for part 3, we're going to talk about 2 kind of hidden benefits of getting a good edition, of paying a little more money to get a good edition. And one of them is simply readability. I want you to assume that you have 2 editions and both editions have the exact same notes, exact same dynamics, exact same articulations, exact same everything. But imagine you had to always read on this compared to always reading on this. Again, let's assume that all the notes were the same. They were the exact same quality in every way. There's a couple big differences. The one is just the size, but also lots of things are using sometimes older print methods, older plates. Basically, plates is a way of saying like the way they used to make copy where they put the plate and they stamp the plate, but older scans of the notes, and it's fine. You can read it, but it's definitely harder to read. If you plan on spending hundreds of hours, maybe more than that, if you play many pieces from these books, staring at this music, readability becomes a factor. You start thinking, oh, I spent I bought my Beethoven sonatas and I bought a cheap edition of Beethoven sonatas and I've been looking at this page. I've played multiple sonatas. I've looked at this page for like 500 hours, looked at pages of this book, and I saved $15. How much money did I save an hour? Yeah, I probably should have just upgraded a little bit and had just a better experience reading the notes because it does make a difference. First of all, you can have your music further back. It's easier to see things kind of broad strokes in your page if it's laid out better. I also want to show you an example of, wait just a sec, online printed music. And this is kind of a recent thing where you can just read on your phone, read on your computer, or just print something online. I went and I wanted to make a video about this piece, the Last Schubert Sonata. If you missed that video, you can go check it out. But I love this piece. I didn't own a copy of it. And I was like, well, I'll just get it online. So I'm just going to talk about this piece in a video. I printed out the first few pages and I wanted to show you that when you start to compare this, hang on a sec, to this, you really start to see the difference just in the size of the notes. Again, just readability does really pay off when you just have to look at the music for so long. But there is another big thing. Readability is one thing. The second kind of hidden benefit I want to talk about, though, of a good edition is this right here. This is the mark of pride amongst us piano players. If you have a Beethoven like this that's been beat up to this degree, it means you've used your book well, right? You've used it a lot. Not a single page has even thought about falling out on me. And you might think that if you don't play a lot of the same edition over and over again, you might not know about this problem, but it's a really big issue. Little story time. I want to buy my first Beethoven when I was in high school, and I was going to buy a Beethoven edition. I was at the store, and this guy was sitting, not this one, but a Henley was sitting right there in the music store, and right beside it was a different edition, which I will not name. And I was like, well, the one's $35. And one's $50 at the time, $35.50. I was like, it's $15 less. I should probably just get the cheaper one. But I asked the guy that worked there, if you're listening to this, I love you, Greg. You really inspired me to do a lot of music. You're awesome. Greg, you're amazing, amazing. He's a store salesman that like inspired customers to like do more music. A great guy. But he was like, I mean, the Henley's probably better, but I think he didn't want us to feel guilty into spending more money, which I get. He was being really nice, but he should have just smacked me and been like, buy the Henley. Because you know what happened? I got a couple months into using this cheap edition and the pages started falling out. Then I had to pay to get spiral bound, and the paper just literally just started shredding because you use these books heavily. You use them for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And that's just one sonata. If you're planning on playing like 5 out of one edition, who knows how long you're going to spend with this? Not that long later, I got to college and I brought out my bad edition, and my teacher's like, you can play Beethoven, but not using that. And I was like, ow. So I bought a Henley, and then I have used this book, as you can tell, the first volume, second volume, so heavily. Even the binding's starting to shred a little bit, but it's like perfect condition. I've used this book so much in teaching and playing myself, like carrying it around, lugging it to places. So at the time I saved $15 to get a book that lasted me a couple months. And then I spent the $15 more and had a book that I have used heavily and has stayed in great condition and has better notes, more readable ever since. Now, there are, of course, exceptions out there, like individual composers and publishers. Like some people love the Paderewski Chopins, right? But in general, you're pretty safe getting an Urtext for anything. That is one other kind of hidden benefit of them, is the safe factor. You're probably not going to go that wrong getting an Urtext. However, that doesn't mean I always recommend an Urtext all the time. So my strongest recommendation for getting an Urtext is when you're buying sets of pieces. Please don't do the thing where you buy like a Beethoven sonata and you spend $10 or $15 for it. Then somewhere down the road, you buy one other Beethoven sonata and you spend $10 or $15 for it. Then down the road, you buy one more Beethoven sonata. Like, I guess if you only ever played 3, you've only spent $30 to $45, right? But then you don't have it on your shelf. You can't like just take down and say, boom, I have 2 volumes of this. I have all the Beethoven sonatas. I hear a cool Beethoven sonata. I should go check it out. Do I want to play that one? I can play it. I can choose to play it. I cannot play it, but I have it sitting right here. When you are buying sets of pieces, I highly, highly recommend Urtext editions. If you're not able to afford an Urtext edition yet, I would say, especially if you're buying a set that you're going to keep for the rest of your life, just use something online for a few weeks or a couple months. Maybe you get enough money to get the Urtext. Like I'm serious about that. I think it's better to like save up for the big sets because the durability, like I mentioned earlier, the durability of being able to use Urtext, almost all the high quality big brand Urtext editions, Henleys and Bärenreiter and Wiener Urtext, you're going to be able to use those pieces your whole life, those books, and they won't fall apart. But beyond those, there are times where if you're buying like a one-off piece, you just want, I just want this one little piece by Brahms. Do you always need an Urtext edition? If you're planning on like performing it on a concert stage or something, maybe you should get the best edition you can get out there, and then you can do some individual research. If it's like a one-off piece, it's like just, this is a little piece this composer published, one variation set by this composer I want to buy, maybe you consider that. But when it comes to buying the big sets of pieces, I think the readability and the durability, and then just of course the authenticity of what you're seeing in the music is definitely worth the investment. Now, one last kind of practical tip for me that will hopefully save you some money. In general, the older the composer, going back to like Bach, the better edition you want to get. As you get later in the Romantic era, then especially as you start getting to the 20th century, you might not even see like the big brands like Henley putting out some of those pieces. And also there might not be any difference in the editions, because at that point the composers, 20th century composers could have written it on a computer and printed it off, and it's just literally note for note, like right there. There isn't like the manuscript going to the publisher, and there's no artistry or work involved in like copying. It's just, this is what the composer wrote. We have their exact thing note for note in all editions. Even as you get later and later in the Romantic era, if I had to kind of make a choice, I would say the earlier composers, as you get classical and Baroque, I would worry more about it than I would worry about the later Romantic composers. But I did follow my own piece of advice one time and really regret it, because I bought a 20th century piece. The edition was fine. The notes were authentic. It was hard to read. It fell apart, and it would not stay open. Like, this book would not stay open. It would just fold itself closed. And I would like fold it up. I'm not going to do it to my Henley, but I would fold it over backwards and just push the binding in, piece of junk music trying to get the thing, please stop closing when I'm playing. I could never fix it. It was just the most frustrating thing. And I'm like, yeah, a few extra bucks for a better edition probably would have been worth it. All right, so obviously, as I hinted to throughout the video, this discussion is a lot more nuanced than we're getting into today. I just noticed that a lot of people don't even know where to start with Urtext. We kind of throw around the term, oh, do you have an Urtext to this? And a lot of people don't even know what that means. So hopefully that gets your feet wet. Hopefully that equips you to go out, do some of your own research, and remember, first of all, first and foremost, make some beautiful music. Buying an edition will not make you a musician. Make some beautiful music. Maybe if you feel the need to, get a good edition to help guide you in doing that even better. But go make some beautiful music. See you guys.